Donald Trump is president once again, and somehow he may have accomplished more before he even took office than he did his entire first term. Because for a lot of young Gen Zers, unfortunately, their first political memory may be Donald Trump saving TikTok, which is absolutely wild given how all this went down. But for more on this, Shayna is going to introduce our first ever guest on Concepts of a Pod.
Yeah, so if you couldn't tell, I'm a little upset about today, but I know we're all gonna get through it. We're gonna go forward in all of this. I've got to make a note. It's been so interesting seeing all of the notes that TikTok made because I'm someone who is addicted to TikTok. Many people, including you, Jordan, said, "Are you okay when TikTok got banned?" Because I spend hours on it a day. But it's been really interesting seeing how social media has played such a big part in like just politics and specifically like electoral presidential politics. And I've got one of my friends named here. His name is Adam, and he's a social media expert. He wants to tell us a little bit more about how social media and news interact with one another because it's just such an interesting topic. And I'm gonna let Adam explain it. I can't do it better than he can.
Yes, first of all, thanks for having me. As Shayna said, I am a social media consultant. I've worked with some of the top influencers on TikTok in the world. And I also consult with elected officials on how to go viral, how to use the algorithm in their favor. So I'm kind of a good amalgamation of these two things, TikTok and politics put together. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And wow, that secret sauce of how to go viral is something everyone chases these days. And unfortunately, it feels like Democrats have not been very good at. So we are really excited to bring you onto Concepts of a Pod to talk more about what Democrats could have done better in the world of social media to combat the effect that Donald Trump clearly had. I mean, doesn't help that he was given a booster pack from his billionaire friends running the social media companies between Elon over at Twitter, now X, or Zuckerberg at Meta seems to have made a hard right. And now the CEO of TikTok is chumming with Trump at the inauguration as
I mean,
they pull this stunt.
we saw at Inauguration Day some of the richest people in the entire world who own these social media platforms were in the line in front of people who were supposed to be on Trump's cabinet. Thought that was something, memorable and applicable in this situation.
Well, yeah, guys. So I think what's actually the craziest thing that we haven't really talked about in this whole situation is how ironic and how much of a 180 it's been since Trump's first term. And so I remember I was actually interviewed in a Reuters newscast when Trump was trying to ban TikTok back in 2020. I was very anti banning TikTok. Like, we're really trying to make a career out of this. Like, you can't just take it away. And now, fast forward 4 years, I was actually kind of leaning towards thinking that TikTok should be banned just because of its ability to potentially send narratives to our youth. I mean, it was crazy things going on. Like, I mean, there were like, I heard that something Bin Laden said had gone viral, and then
But
you
yeah,
had
that was
people on
good.
TikTok like, yeah, you had people
That,
on TikTok like, Bin Laden's not seems like a great dude. Like, what?
yeah,
Social media is wild
Yeah.
they were saying he
and
was
how fast things can go
misunderstood.
viral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
now 4 years later, I'm like, yeah, maybe we do need to ban TikTok. And then Trump's like, actually, nope. I'm gonna wait until the day before, and I'm gonna, pull a fast one on the Biden administration. So it's been a crazy 180.
I think you're so right. And talk about spreading narratives. I think what just happened on TikTok is a perfect example that this company decided they wanted to get in favor with Trump. So they said to him, here's an easy win. CEO goes to meet with him last week. All of a sudden, TikTok voluntarily pulls down Saturday night. By the way, that deadline wasn't until Sunday. They went dark early, put up that message that blamed the ban, right? And then Sunday morning, all of a sudden, a day before Trump had even taken office, somehow there's a new message, welcome back because President Trump saved it. Like, Are we that easy to gaslight?
For me, I think the biggest thing here is I have no idea why the Biden administration agreed to make the ban the day before he leaves office. I mean, that was kind of, if you just look at the timing, you could have foreseen something like this. You saw in the past week or two, Zuckerberg comes out and says, hey, you know what? We're not going to fact check like we did. It was too politically motivated how our fact checkers were doing things. So, I mean, TikTok was the clear next social media platform to fall in line. And yeah, I mean, the Democrats pulled a fast one over there. Now 170 million people got a message saying that Trump saved their lives, and that's what they're going to remember.
And this really is all about control, isn't it? I mean, it's really scary the degree to which this almost modern day oligarchy is forming in the United States between you've got Trump at the center of it all, Elon, Bezos was at the inauguration. It's everyone in that picture. And now the CEO of TikTok's involved. This is now beyond national borders, just blatant corruption.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think the biggest thing here politically for Democrats, I know this was a big talking point after the election loss, was we need to do a post-mortem, quote unquote. What did we do wrong? How could we have won? I mean, you got to start asking yourself what happened in the past 4 years that made all of these super liberal, super democratic CEOs of these social media platforms. What made them over the course of 4 years completely do a 180 and go over to Trump? While I definitely think it is something we need to watch to ensure we don't have an oligarchy forming, Democrats really need to look in the mirror and see, what did we do? Why did we lose the support of these very wealthy, very powerful people seemingly overnight, at least in political terms?
Yeah, it's interesting. With Elon, I know exactly where it comes from. A lot of it was with him, COVID stuff, a fight with Gavin Newsom over closing down factories making Teslas that then snowballed into picking fights with the Biden administration over union labor in EV plants that led to Biden snubbing Elon from an EVs Made in America event at the White House, only to insult Elon so much that he turns all together. And these complex political structures that were in place don't hold up in a world where one person can wield so much influence by the nature of these algorithms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, COVID definitely had a bit to do with it, but I mean, I think the second point you made is probably one of the bigger ones. I think, for someone like Elon Musk, who is the world's richest man, it seems like perpetually fighting with people like Gavin Newsom and other Democrats. And I think, Democrats have become synonymous with regulation, but now it's gotten to a point where, people who own major businesses are like, I want to go with the party who's not going to regulate as much. I think the overregulation has made it so it's harder for people to build homes. It's harder to get these permits. And Trump came along and said, hey, I'm going to get rid of all regulations. You can do whatever you want. And I mean, that's pretty attractive to people who run these major companies who are, constantly seemingly fighting with, a lot of the regulators, which primarily are Democrat.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense on the part of the billionaires for sure. But what I really want to understand, what I want to ask you more about is when it comes to the masses, the people who voted for Trump, because obviously if it was just billionaires voting for Trump, he wouldn't do very well because there aren't very many billionaires. But there are a lot of people who voted to cut services that go to them in favor of tax cuts for billionaires. And it was because Democrats weren't able to successfully message to the people that the Republicans are on the side of the billionaires, not you. And I kind of want to pick more into why that is, because I know you work outside of politics. So what was the conversation on social media around that?
So, I mean, the first thing I'll say is I think the Democratic strategists were just out of touch with everyday people. Think that when you look back at it, that's going to be the biggest mistake they made. What I did was working on social media. I actually went through tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 comments every time there was a post about Trump or Harris or anybody like that, I would go through the comments and, I'm able to discern, a lot of people are like, oh, maybe they're bots. I'm able to discern, with a pretty high, with pretty high confidence, which accounts are real, which are fake. So I would go through all the accounts that I deemed real and I would just hear what they had to say. And about 2 to 3 months before the election, I'm starting to see these pages on Instagram, these pages on TikTok that are primarily minority. Let's say there's 70% minority following, which is supposed to vote Democrat. They're probably 70 to 80% pro-Trump in the comments.
Whoa.
And that was a moment. Yeah, that was a moment when I realized we were in trouble. The Democrats had no idea the landslide that was going to happen. And so I started telling people in the Democratic Party that I'm close with, I'm like, hey, look, I don't think this is going to work out. We need to change because if we keep doing the exact same thing, we're going to lose. And unfortunately, a lot of people I told this, they felt confident. They were like, no, man, JD Vance is weird, man. We're going to do a bunch of couch memes. It'll be fine. He's not going to get out. So that's what happened, man.
Did they not realize that the couch memes were only doing well in their own echo chambers?
They didn't. And that's the issue. And that's what, that's why I really don't understand why Kamala Harris didn't go on Joe Rogan's podcast. I mean, Joe Rogan came out and said, hey, look, we invited her to come on. We even discussed potentially flying out to do it with her. And they just canceled. And I think to them, they were like, we don't need to talk to those people. But they didn't realize, the people that listen to Joe Rogan are primarily independents and Republicans. Those are the people they needed to reach. And by skipping these things, I mean, the only thing she really did was call her daddy. But that's the issue, is Call Her Daddy is a primarily liberal, Democratic leaning podcast. The whole point is to do both. And I saw Trump on everything. I saw Trump on Logan Paul, Aiden Ross. He's doing stuff with gamers, streamers. He was everywhere. He was the first to really actually utilize social media to the fullest extent I've ever seen. And I really legitimately think that, was definitely one of the top 2 or 3 reasons that he won.
So interesting you say that about the collaborations too, because I noticed he was everywhere, and the more I think back on it now, that strategy is because he needed to make sure that at least one clip of him found its way into everybody's algorithm somehow, because if you didn't watch Rogan, you watched one of these other guys. Actually, looking back, I think it's kind of hilarious that Kamala's team thought they were doing just as well by doing Call Her Daddy and Oprah when it's just all people who were already voting for her.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that Democrats need to do next time, Democrats need to do a better job at talking to the people that don't agree with them. They need to do a better job at going after the independents. I never saw them make a real push to go after independents and Republicans who maybe didn't like Donald Trump and that they could have maybe flipped at the last moment.
But hey, didn't they have Liz Cheney? Didn't they do the whole Liz Cheney thing for that? No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. I don't think, that would have worked 20 years ago, that might be the problem. The people behind the campaigns have been the same people for the last 20 years. So their first instinct when they need to come up with a big kumbaya bipartisan moment is, hey, let's call a Cheney.
Let's do what worked 20 years ago.
That's something Jordan and I talked about a couple weeks ago on one of our podcasts, was that the same people from the last, older than I am, if you want to do the math, who are trying to play the same playbook over and over and over again, but things have changed. And like you said, Trump went on Joe Rogan, Logan Paul.
Yeah.
They should have used hashtag justice for young white men. That's really where the Democrats put it.
Honestly,
I'm not going to disagree. I don't know if I agree, but I'm not going to disagree. You know what I
Yeah.
You
mean?
know what, though? They should have, but not in the way that you would expect somebody to, the way people would use it awfully. But yeah, hashtag justice for young white men. They need
Yeah.
better paying jobs to raise their families.
Okay, I don't know if this will actually make it in the episode or not, but I'm going to be brave enough to say it.
Go for
My
it.
ex-boyfriend loves like Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate. And he's one of those people that believed that like young white men deserved more in their lives. He just like totally believed that women could be equal, but like not really. Like men always had to be a step above. And I feel like a lot of people who watch like the Logan Pauls, the Joe Rogans, these men believe they should be like a step above. But I know the Democrats didn't reach out to that demographic of men. I wouldn't want to touch that group, that demographic
Why?
either, but
But think about it from the perspective of this group. I mean, why would they vote for people who said literally care so little about you, we're not even going to try? Like, it's
that's
so
no, that's what I mean though. I may get a lot of hate for this. I understand how a lot of men feel like they have been forgotten and left behind in the last couple of years with how like people have been campaigning. Men are supposed to be equal to women. And that I think has been something that has been really forgotten in a lot of campaigning. It's been all on like women should be equal. And I obviously very much want that. But if we're talking like strictly about strategy and how Democrats could do better, Democrats have forgotten about men, like in
for men in
general.
general.
As I said, I'll always say the quiet part out loud. And I think, like, the Democratic Party has not invested as much in men and has forgotten about them.
I think it's also a microcosm of this problem is in these social media teams. Because if you saw the picture of the Kamala Harris social media team, I mean, great people. I don't know if there was a single straight white
Yeah.
man on the entire team. And like the people writing Tim Walz's football tweets didn't know anything about football themselves. And that's a problem.
I want to mention this before we get into this conversation. We all on here, I think I speak for all of us here, we all very much believe in diversity and that it's really important. Like, diversity includes the people who are also like already in the majority. And I
Yeah.
think that's
So
something that's often forgotten about.
So look, I want to say two things. So number one, I don't even think it's just young white man. Van Jones, who was part of the Obama administration,
Love Van
he came
Jones.
out and said. I mean, the other thing is, it's young black men in general. What in the Democratic policies was beneficial to black men? There wasn't anything. They were going out. They were fighting for women's rights, which obviously we all agree with. They were fighting for LGBTQ rights, which we obviously all agree with. But at some point, the Democratic Party got to a point where they're only fighting for marginalized communities, that the marginal community has sort of been forgotten about. Now, the second thing I would say is, Shana, you were at the DNC here in Chicago as well.
Yeah, I was I was there 3 of the 4 days.
Okay, so I was with the alderman. We got into the creator room.
I was
So
there
the
too.
DNC, amazing. So for those who don't know, the DNC invited some of the top influencers, I guess, who make content about politics. But they only invited people who are already super Democratic leaning. And now I know it's easy to say, oh, well, like other people wouldn't have come to the DNC. I don't think that's true. I think there are a lot of people who are in the middle. I think you could invite a Logan Paul. There are a lot of influencers in the middle who maybe were leaning towards Trump, but maybe could have seen like, oh, this is actually a really cool event. The Democrats I've met have been really nice. That's what it takes to start slowly turning some of these independents over. And the Democrats miss a huge opportunity for that. And so I know I'm going to sound critical of Democrats on most of this conversation, but it's because I want the Democratic Party to be better.
Good. Yeah. And that's
That's
why we
it.
have you here.
Actually, that reminded me of something. I'm going to bring up Elon Musk. I know he's a very, touchy topic, but Elon Musk was the ultimate undecided voter. And I'm thinking of a very particular moment in time was after all of the hurricanes and the flooding happened in North Carolina, Elon Musk was spreading misinformation online. And I know that Jordan, you and I have talked about that on another podcast episode about how Elon Musk was spreading misinformation about North Carolina online. Pete Buttigieg posted and said, call me. I will talk to you. And they talked. And then after that, Elon Musk went and posted and said, you know what? Here's the right information. Here's how you can help out North Carolina. And I think that like directly relates back to what you were saying, Adam, is that there's so many people that are not like against the Democratic Party, but are uneducated about politics. And that is something that, I wish was untrue. And I don't like saying out loud necessarily, but I think that there needs to be more education about how the government works and how politics and voting works in the United States. And that's something that, Jordan and I have talked about many, many times in this podcast, and what New Digital Now is kind of about is educating people. I totally understand the people who are not a part of any party or feel hesitant to join any party because, like, I get it. Politics sucks. It's really hard to understand sometimes. The government is super hard to understand sometimes. But like that's why we're here. We're here to help that out. And I'm so glad that we have people like Adam here who want to talk a little bit more about an outside perspective of just what's going on in the world and how people perceive things. Because, like I said, politics sucks. It's super complicated to understand sometimes. Yeah.
Well, Pete Buttigieg, I think, is probably the Democrats' best surrogate that they have. I mean, he's the only one that I hear talk and make sense these days. And yeah, I mean, we need more people like him who can just talk and who aren't going to automatically just close people off. He was actually on this thing where he sits in a circle of Republicans
That
and
was
they all
awesome.
come up and talk to him.
That was
Yeah,
awesome.
so
I loved watching that.
yeah, that was great, and we need more politicians to do that. And I can't think of anybody else in the Democratic Party right now who could do that
No.
as well as he did. That's
I
the
can't
issue. Why is he the only person?
Yeah.
Exactly. No, the reason he's the only one who will do it is because I can't think of many people in the Democratic Party who wouldn't either get eaten alive or do fine, but say one thing that becomes the whole viral moment that's just not phrased exactly right. And
Yeah,
Pete
and the
Buttigieg
other
is
thing,
just superhuman.
the other thing I'm going to plug in here is we all know I love to plug in a field whenever I can, but I think this is also a relevant moment that specifically back in 2020 when Pete Buttigieg was running for president, I know Pete Buttigieg himself went out and knocked doors and talked to people. And like if people called him or called the campaign office, they had questions for Pete. Pete would answer questions and they would record those conversations and post them online. And people want to see that their electeds are human and that they're talking to humans and interacting with humans, especially in their district. And that was something that Pete did incredibly well. He is willing to talk with people and talk with regular constituents, not just the big people high up, the big donors, the high rollers. And that's what we need more of in government. And I'm
Yeah.
so afraid we're going to lose that in the next few years. And that social media is just going to be dictated by all the people in office and in the cabinet, which is kind of what it's looking like right now, unfortunately.
100%. And that is exactly why we created New Digital Now and why we started Concepts of a Pod once Donald Trump won, because our entire goal is to take the pulse of the Democratic donor base using our digital focus group, where we reach out to Democratic donors and ask their opinions on major issues in real time. That's the kind of content we think Democrats need to create for the future, which is why we end every episode with a Q&A from our supporter focus group. So
We want people to be real.
yeah, the question I wanted to bring in and to ask you too, Adam, from the focus group today was, why isn't the Democratic Party taking more aggressive action against MAGA/Project 2025? And I'm going to add a little bit to this question as well, which is a summary of some things we saw from some other questions. What can we be doing to break through the lies and propaganda in the media? And I ask you this, Adam, because you are such an expert at the algorithm. How do we get our message about the people we need to help and the work we need to do through the noise of Donald Trump?
Guys, so for the first question, I would say, in terms of why Democrats aren't doing more to combat MAGA and Project 2025. I mean, the issue is Trump has tried to distance himself from 2025 the whole time. So it's hard to sort of go after someone for something that they said they weren't going to do. The second half of that is, I mean, the Democrats got decimated. This was, I mean, we lost every chamber of government. I mean, there's nothing we really can do legally without at least getting some Republicans to flip. I think the Democrats need to rethink their strategy. If you look at the top three issues in this election, it was always inflation, the border, and women's reproductive rights. And primarily, it seems like, you know, in polling, reproductive rights almost always polled third. And so what that says is people completely reject the Democrats' handling of the economy and of the border. And so Democrats need to just come out and say, hey, look, this is not sustainable. I mean, you know, being here in Chicago, the mayor has spent over $500 million of our money on migrants who are here legally. And then about a month ago, we have a $300 million budget shortfall, and he says, I want to raise property taxes by $300 million. How pissed off are you if you're in Chicago and the mayor says, hey, I spent this money on these people who came here illegally, but I'm going to need $300 million from you because I decided to do that. And when you have these things where you're not listening to the people who are coming to the city hall meetings every week, you're going to slowly lose them. And these Democrats are eventually going to get fed up and they're going to flip.
Yeah,
As
I
someone
hear
who's
you.
from Chicago, I don't disagree with you on a lot of that.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, I mean, the Republicans certainly didn't win by going to the center. If anything, what they did was attack Democrats and then play into people's fears. So I wonder if part of that new strategy, too, isn't necessarily going extreme, but certainly pointing out everything that's wrong in people's lives now that Republicans are causing, the way they made stuff about us. I think we can be aggressive in telling the truth about them now.
Yeah, but so here's my point, right? So let's say if this is the spectrum, this side is what Trump is doing, mass deportations, everybody's gone. We were here at like everyone should just be able to walk into the country, and if you say there's a problem, you're a racist. Like that is a worse strategy. You know, the Democrats were gaslighting people. The Democrats could have just said, hey, we loosened the border because we wanted to be compassionate. Now we realize we probably went a little too far. And what we want to do is we want to secure the border, but we still want to protect people like the Dreamers and people who have been living here for 5+ years that haven't been arrested. But we need to get rid of criminals. That's it. That's the compromise. But they still haven't done that.
Democrats have not. They fight for things, but they don't necessarily put deadlines or regulations on things. And humans like having structure, and humans like having routine, and that like includes deadlines and those things. I think that's something where Democrats like really lost out with this year is that they're like, I'm for this, but I'm not going to put a specific deadline on this. Republicans were willing to do that. And I really think like a fair chunk of this was just human nature that people really, really like having those deadlines and structure, and Democrats weren't willing to provide structure.
Democrats are the kings of saying, like, hey, we're going to do this thing. Or the issue is when you press them, and, you know, I watch Bill Maher. Bill Maher is one of my favorite political commentators. I mean, he's one of very few people who is truly independent and calls out both sides equally. He presses these people like, you know, people like Beto O'Rourke, which is, you know, the reason I think he was never elected is you ask him straight up, like, okay, what is the solution, right? How many people crossing the border is too much? And they respond with, oh, well, look, we just got to be compassionate. You have to put a number. You have to say, hey, look, we're taking in 1 million people a year. Maybe we can do 1.5. You know what I mean? Like, if you just gaslight people and say, yeah, no, like, it'll never be too many, that's BS. And now we're seeing it. Now that these blue cities like New York, Chicago, and LA, which was already in a crisis, now that they're getting overloaded, people are like, hey, they're gaslighting us. They keep saying it'll be fine if we keep letting people in, but they're using our tax dollars to pay for people who just got here.
It's a
That's
big
just,
problem.
it's
It's a
just,
huge issue.
God, yeah, no, it's really tough because it really all comes down to admitting that nothing's perfect, because I think everyone knows that in real life, in our lives, nothing's perfect.
exactly.
I think that Democrats in particular are afraid to admit those imperfections, and a lot of times it's because we're attacked for them. But Republicans just let people steamroll over theirs. They don't shy away. They're not afraid to say they have concepts of a plan on a debate stage, and people cut them that slack because not everyone has it perfect. I mean, with Donald Trump, at least, you know he's in it for himself and he's transparent about that, but you can't tell what Democrats' motivations really are other than staying elected, staying in power, and that makes people feel gross. So, yeah, we do need this new strategy, and as we continue, we're gonna say what we're gonna do what we're gonna say, and not avoid the tough questions, even if we don't have all the answers, because we see that that didn't get us anywhere. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining us on
Thank you for
Concepts of the
joining us
Pod
today.
and opening our eyes a little bit to what we missed in the 2024 election.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been great talking to you.
Before we go, I wanted to just give like a little reminder that like I'm trying so hard not to cry during this. What's going to happen? Things are going to be okay, and I am so hopeful things are going to be okay in the next 4 years. But we're here to take in any of your questions, your concerns. I most likely promise that we share these concerns with you. And we know that there's going to be some really tough times during these next few years and during this presidential term. But we're here with you. We're here to fight with you. You know, just like as a young woman in politics, I want to let everyone know, please don't stop fighting for what you believe in. I'm not going to cry. I already have started crying, but don't stop fighting for what you believe in. And I'm here with you. And we're going to make it through this.
Shayna, yeah,
I
we
know.
are, and
I
I
never
know,
cry during anything, so you guys are lucky you're going to see me cry on the internet. But
and I, for one, acknowledge the privilege I have in that I am more angry than I am personally affected.
oh, I'm angry too.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong.
yeah, and I
No,
am,
I'm really angry too, but
and that is why I have dedicated my time to being here to collect input from Democrats like you who are feeling this way, who are devastated that our party couldn't do better for us, because it kills me, having worked in the Democratic Party in the past, that we couldn't do better. So we're going to be here. We're going to send you these focus groups when Trump does stupid stuff. And yeah, when
no,
Trump does stupid shit, yeah, okay, I'll say
yeah,
it.
we're
Say it.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll say
we're
it.
here for all of you, and I'm someone who I'm not the most emotional person, and you know, not the biggest fan of crying on the internet, but I think this is an important moment to show like just how impactful specifically today was, which, by the way, we recorded this episode a couple hours after all of the inauguration activities ended. So it's pretty fresh. I know so we posted, a couple days after the inauguration has been done, but we are just as angry as all of you may be, and we are just as frustrated as all of you may be. But we want you to know that we are not done fighting and that you should not be done fighting either.
Yeah, and we will be here with you. Take the time you need. I know it's not easy. I know 75% of our focus group said they didn't watch the inauguration, and honestly, I get it. Nobody needed to hear that
I don't
guy
blame
talk.
you guys. It was rough. It was rough.
Yeah, but when you're ready to get back in the fight, we will be here with you, and we will be here to make sure that your voices are heard so that we can do it better. So thank you for all of your support that has gotten us to a place where we can hopefully make something better for the future, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for fighting along with us.
Yeah.